J.R.R. Tolkien is almost universally regarded as the maker of Middle-earth, and yet he would not have bestowed such a title upon himself. He regarded himself more as an honoured guest within the region, rather than its creator. The realm of fairy story is wide and deep and high, and filled with many things, he says. All manner of beasts and birds are found there, shoreless seas and stars uncounted, beauty that is an enchantment and an ever-present peril, both joy and sorrow as sharp as swords. In that realm, a man may perhaps count himself fortunate to have wandered, but its very richness and strangeness tie the tongue of a traveller who would report them. And while he is there, it is dangerous for him to ask too many questions, lest the gates be shut and the keys lost. Looked at in this way, stories clearly open a door into another realm, and those who pass through, even for a moment, step beyond their time, and maybe even beyond time itself. Yet what is this realm, this mysterious other dimension, far away and ever near, and who are the characters that inhabit it? Tolkien named it fairy, a realm of power, he said, and fantasy is the means of entering it. Carl Jung, the Swiss analyst, called it the collective unconscious, to be reached via his notion of active imagination, whilst Enrico Bern, the Sufi-inspired French philosopher, called it the Imaginal, or mundus imaginalis, reached in prayer and meditation. A philologist, a psychiatrist and philosopher, yet quite clearly visionary artists too, drawn through powerful experience deep into the transpersonal, into the mystic. They arose in my mind as given things, Tolkien wrote to his son Christopher about the tales, and as they came separately, so too the links grew, an absorbing though continually interrupted labour. Yet always I had the sense of recording what was already there somewhere, not of inventing. He regarded the resulting tales and paintings as a combination of inspiration and invention based upon his travels and discoveries within the realm. The intersection between the two he regarded as a fusion field of sorts, within which the magic of his creations, or sub-creations as he preferred to say, occurred. Always he had the sense of being guided in his endeavours by something greater than himself, and his task, as he saw it, was to stay attuned to that power, so that the reader or viewer of the paintings might experience them as intended. Writing to W.H. Auden, he repeated what he had said to his son. I dare say something has been going on in the unconscious for some time, and that accounts for my feelings throughout, that I was not inventing, but recording, imperfectly, and had at times to wait for what really happened to come through. In Carl Jung's exquisite handwritten red book, that looks more like a medieval illuminated manuscript than a work of recent times, he recounts deeply personal visions and encounters with apparently autonomous aspects of the collective and transpersonal, akin to those encountered by Tolkien. When he began setting these things down around 1915, he was at a stage of his life when he felt he had lost contact with his soul and had set out to rediscover it. "My soul," he cried, "where are you? Do you hear me? I speak. I call you. Are you there?" Much to his surprise and initial consternation, he was met with a reply. Several characters appeared and spoke, most notably a wise old man, a spirit guide of sorts named Philemon, who had appeared in Ovid's Metamorphoses and in Goethe's Faust, a character not unlike Tolkien's Gandalf. Later, Jung said, "Philemon was simply a superior knowledge, and he taught me psychological objectivity and the actuality of the soul. He formulated and expressed everything which I had never thought." He deemed Philemon and other such characters to be aspects within the psyche, which he could produce, but which could also produce themselves as having their own life. They were for him, therefore, both psychological and metaphysical, and set the scene, if you like, for his theory of the collective unconscious, a vast realm, he explained, replete with archetypes and active principles that interacted between that source and human consciousness. Of these brief years, between 1913 and 1916, Jung writes, "The years when I pursued the inner images were the most important time of my life. Everything else is to be derived from this. Everything later was merely an outer classification, scientific elaboration, and integration into life. But the numinous beginning that contained everything was then." In allowing such phenomena to speak, says James Hillman, the American post-Jungian, Jung shifted the field of inquiry fundamentally away from the empirical toward what might be apprehended, rightly in Hillman's view, as poetic and phenomenological. "Poetry is the only appropriate language for matters of the psyche," he says, "the only language, save music and the sacred arts, capable of rendering the mystery of the soul." Between the last degree of time and the first degree of eternity. This beautiful quotation by Enrico Bern introduced me to his notion of the mundus imaginalis, the realm seemingly so close to fairy, and even aspects of Jung's great collective. Here he is writing about storytelling within the Sufi tradition, in which stories open doors to the imaginal realm and become initiations for teller and listener alike. The mystical recital says what cannot be said or make itself known in any other way. For the mystic does not recount a story. He is that story. But it is a story that breaks visible history, since it is the passage to that which is hidden from the appearances of this world. The mystic is the object of this meta-historic story, because it is in him that it takes place, and this is why he is at the same time his agent, the actor, and active subject. Elsewhere, Bern quotes the Sufi wisdom tradition in which it is held that the reciter, the deed recited, and the hero of the recital are one soul and single reality, and this takes place in every being according to the measure of each being. Bern's Sufi storyteller, Jung and Tolkien, have all clearly attuned to something of a much higher order, like maybe Dante did in the Divine Comedy, or William Blake and the English Romantics in their own visionary outpourings. Joseph Campbell, the great mythographer, is quite clear about how such offerings come into being. They are glimpsed from above, he says, by those highly attuned souls who then render their experience into poetic form. The visionary experiences of both Jung and Tolkien took place over relatively short periods of time, when for both men, writes Dr. Lance Owens, the doors to the other realms were blown wide open. It is a testament to the sanity of both men that they were not overwhelmed by the flood of experience. Both men, we know, spent the rest of their lives attempting to work through and integrate the material generated during these intensely creative years. The thresholds of such realms are not easy to cross. All the more reason, then, to enlist the help of a guide. Myth, legend, and fairy tale are replete with guardian characters not unlike Philemon, Gandalf, and Virgil. Often, a ritual cleansing must be undertaken before access to the mysteries may be gained. We must remove our shoes, so to speak, shift our focus away from everyday consciousness, as these adventurers have clearly done before us. Yet humility is the quality most required in such endeavours, and reverence too. It is not to be assumed that one might pass there and back again, merely at will. For this is sacred ground, as Bern reveals, and sometimes we might not be able to match its frequency. We are spiritual beings, of course, yet we are flesh and blood creatures too, so it is not always easy. The perils and pitfalls of hubris are ever present in such endeavours, and so humility is our only true safeguard. Only ever by grace did Tolkien believe he was admitted to fairy. Only ever by grace had he come and gone since he was a young man in the trenches of World War I, when he had first begun to set things down to accompany the elven languages he was developing, and later, as he convalesced back in England with his beloved Edith looking after him. What wondrous light-filled days they must have been, paradoxically, for they existed hand in hand with grief and loss, and yet the comings and goings went on, and it must have seemed as if they would go on forever. But it was not to be, and eventually the light dimmed, and his excursions became fewer and fewer, until at last they were no more. Then there was only the memory of what had been. Much later, toward the end of his life, the short tale of Smith of Wootton Major came to him, and he set it down in earnest. It was to be the last tale he wrote before his death in 1973. Some say it's autobiographical in a way. Who knows? It certainly concerns the adventures of one such soul, the smith's son, fortunate to come and go between fairy and the everyday world by means of a fey star discovered in a children's party cake. And it concerns the necessity too, many years later, of giving up that star so that another might know its magic. I will not spoil the tale for those who have not yet encountered it, but I will tell a little of its wonders. For at the end of all his travels, Starbrow, as he becomes known, not only has his memories, but the gift of a living flower also. A keepsake given to him by a beautiful elven maiden with whom he once danced in the Vale of Evermorn. He did not know it at the time, but she was the fairy queen herself, the anima mundi, if you like, soul of the world. The flower did not wither, nor grow dim, and they kept it as a secret and a treasure. The smith made a little casket with a key for it, and there it lay, and was handed down for many generations in his kin. And those who inherited the key would at times open the casket and look long at the living flower, till the casket closed again. The time of its shutting was not theirs to choose. Grace, you see, only ever by grace. So have in mind the words of this great man, if ever you should wander in the deep, deep realms of fairy, and savour it whilst you can, lest the gates be shut and the keys be lost.